Hello, and welcome to this press conference following the Eurogroup meeting. If everybody's ready, yes. So we're joined by the President of the Eurogroup, Pascal Donohoe, the Commissioner for the Economy, Paolo Gentiloni, and the Managing Director of the ESM, Klaus Regling. I'll immediately give the floor to the President of the Eurogroup to brief us on the meeting.
So good evening, everybody, and we've just had a very worthwhile Eurogroup meeting. We started our meeting with a discussion on the economic situation, which continues to be challenging due to the impact of Russia's military aggression and all the global developments that arise from that. And as always, our thoughts go out to all who are bearing the brunt of this war. We began by the IMF giving us an overview of their most recent euro area staff visit, listening to the Fund, to the Commission and to the ECB. It is clear that there is a common diagnosis on the challenges we face in terms of growth slowdown, inflation, shielding the most vulnerable and getting back to a sustainable recovery. On the policies, the key part of our agenda today was to get to a common view on budget policy orientation for 2023. We achieved in this, and we have issued a statement. You can read the statement in more detail, and I want to outline a few points from it. First, the focus of fiscal policy in 2023 reflects the economic outlook and the nature of our risks. In particular, as conditions currently stand, there is consensus that supporting overall demand is not warranted and that our focus should be on protecting the most vulnerable. Second, we will aim to preserve debt sustainability and focus on how we can sustain growth in the long run, and we will also avoid taking decisions that add to inflationary pressure and that complicate monetary policy transmission. There are already many schemes in place to cushion the impact of high energy prices, but we cannot collectively spend our way out of high energy prices. And that is why we focused on the importance of targeting support and investing in durable solutions in terms of renewables and energy efficiency. And finally, the statement is testament to the continued commitment by euro area finance ministers to closely coordinate budgetary policies to ensure a coherent approach that can respond to different situations across member states and also to adapt to changes over time. We also had a very useful input from the European Fiscal Board, and Professor Tiggeson helped very much with our discussion. We then held a very constructive exchange of views on the digital euro. The ECB presented its recent work to us on options to limit unwanted impacts on the financial sector, including outright limits or tools to disincentivise very large holdings of digital euros. We also discussed the issue of the continued use of physical cash alongside a digital euro. The Eurogroup agreed that the issuance of a digital euro should not impede the ECB's ability to fulfil its mandate and should not impair financial stability. At the same time, we need to make sure that the digital euro can be an attractive means of payment and support innovation in a digitalised economy. A clear outcome of our discussion was that a digital euro would only complement cash. It would not replace it. In October, we will discuss the fourth topic of our work plan, the business models of the various public and private actors in the future digital ecosystem. To round off the meeting, we briefly took stock on Croatia, since tomorrow the Council is set to adopt the regulation setting the conversion rate from the kuna to the euro. This is the last procedural step that is needed to allow Croatia to join the euro as of the 1st of January 2023. There was actually no need for a significant discussion in our meeting. Everything is going smoothly, and I very much look forward to welcoming the Croatian Finance Minister as an observer to Eurogroup meetings from September. As I mentioned at the start, I'll say a few words about the ESM. We took the opportunity today to convene the ESM Board of Governors to select a successor to Klaus when he reaches the end of his term. Italy decided to withdraw their excellent candidate, and then we held a round of voting on the two remaining candidates, João Lau and Pierre Gramegna. They're both excellent candidates. They both have a lot of support, but none of them reached the 80% threshold, and we will return to this issue again in September, in which we will aim to make further progress and put in place a new managing director in time for the end of Mr. Regling's mandate. So a wide variety of different topics discussed this evening, in particular our agreement in a very constructive fashion on a budget statement for fiscal policy in the euro area for 2023. It's an important development, and we will return to the digital euro in October, by which point we will have made further progress on the new managing director of the ESM. Thanks, Maria.
Commissioner.
Thank you. Good evening. As Pascal said, we had a broad convergence on the economic outlook, discussing the IMF assessment, and then discussing with the European Fiscal Board. So the euro area economy has shown resilience to the shocks caused by the Russian invasion, thanks also to the momentum for the reopening of our economies post-COVID and the record low unemployment. At the same time, we all know that our economy is navigating troubled waters. The invasion of Ukraine has dented confidence, pushed inflation higher, created a situation of high uncertainty, and is triggering global economic difficulties. I will not enter into more detail on the outlook, but would invite you to join me on Thursday morning when I will present the Commission summer forecast. In terms of fiscal guidance, we shift away from broad-based stimulus towards more prudent policies, stability-oriented policies, if you prefer, in particular for high-debt member states. At the same time, member states should stand ready to adapt. We respond to with the Eurogroup statement, and it is a call that the Commission welcomes and supports. So if you take home three words from this evening, they should be, in my view, stability, coordination, agility. There were also a number of calls today for a swift conclusion of the economic governance review, given the importance of our fiscal rules as a policy anchor for member states. And on this point, I confirm to ministers that the Commission will come forward with its orientation after the summer break. We also, as the President just said, had a useful exchange with the ECB on the ongoing work on a digital euro. We focused in particular today on the need to design of a digital euro to avoid adverse impact on financial intermediation and stability, in line with the core principle on retail central bank digital currencies agreed by the G7. On the subject of the digital euro, let me also underline that we all agree that it should not replace but complement cash. Responses to the Commission targeted consultation, in particular those by citizens, suggest that there is a widespread concern of the digital euro being the first step in phasing out cash. So let me be crystal clear that this is not the case. And lastly, very happy to take today the penultimate procedural step today concerning Croatia's accession to the euro area, with the endorsement of the final conversion rate for the kuna. And this will be, as Pascal just said, communicated tomorrow, once the legal acts are adopted by the Council, clearing the way for Croatia to take this historical step on January the 1st next year. Thank you.
Yes, good evening. Let me add a few points from the ESM perspective. As you heard, we have not selected a new managing director, but I think that's not really an issue because I will be around for 3 more months, and I intend to work during these 3 months. And then in September, I'm confident we find a solution. On the economic situation and the outlook, as you heard, there was broad convergence on the assessment of the current situation among ministers, but importantly also with the IMF that was present in today's meeting. Of course, the war in Ukraine, rising energy and commodity prices, the high inflation and ongoing supply chain problems are putting a massive strain on the economy, on consumers. So the expected growth rates are getting smaller. That's also the view in the markets. But when that happens, it's not surprising that you also find a lot of volatility in the financial markets. Markets are currently adjusting to a new environment with high inflation and high interest rates, an environment that most market participants have never experienced during their professional life. And when markets adjust to such a new environment, there can be overshooting, but it does not mean that we are facing a new euro crisis. We may see less growth than expected earlier in the year, but there are also a number of positive factors at play, like the momentum coming out of the pandemic as the unlocking still has a positive impact, particularly on services. We do have, importantly, Next Generation EU that was designed and agreed during the pandemic, but is also extremely helpful now to promote public investment and reforms. We have high savings of households accumulated during the 2 pandemic years that can be used to support consumption. We have strong balance sheet of banks and the corporate sector. So it's not all doom and gloom. Maybe growth rates will be lower, but there are also these positive factors. In that context, of course, the discussion on the appropriate policy stance in the euro area was very important. And we heard the presentation of the European Fiscal Board. I think the situation as we see it requires a prudent fiscal stance, and I think the statement of the Eurogroup reflects exactly that very well. It gives also important guidance to markets, and I fully agree with Commissioner Gentiloni that it reflects stability, coordination and agility. On Croatia, of course, we are very happy at the ESM that Croatia will join our family. Croatia will join the ESM after joining the euro area, and we are all happy about the remarkable progress that we see in Croatia over the last few years. The technical preparations for Croatia to join the ESM have started and will go very smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open the floor for questions. I'll start with Mark. You have a microphone there.
Yes, good evening, Mark Peperkorn, Volkskrant in the Netherlands. I have 2 questions. Mr. Donohoe, You sound very upbeat and confident about the fact that in September you will find a solution who will replace or succeed, I have to say, Mr. Rekeling. Can you explain us why you are upbeat about this? If you didn't manage in the last 2 months, why would you succeed in September? And Mr. Rekeling, on your turn, you sound very upbeat about there will be no new euro crisis despite the fact that the spreads are rising. Could you maybe explain for me why you're optimistic about it?
Well, it's great to open up with questions regarding the rationale for optimism, and I'll deal with it first. So firstly, I'm an optimistic person by nature, but actually in these particular circumstances regarding the future of the ESM Managing Director, I believe there's very good reason to be optimistic. Mr. Regling's term does not come to an end until October. Given the importance of this post, given the interest that many countries have regarding who the next Managing Director will be, it was always going to take time to reach an outcome. The process is unfolding exactly in line with my expectations. Each time we have met as a Board of Governors, we have made progress in further narrowing down the candidates that could be acceptable to all countries, and we've done that again today. And what we will do is continue with that progress when we meet again in September, and I'm confident that well before Klaus brings his time in the ESM to a close, we will have a very strong candidate in place. The two other things that give me cause for optimism is firstly the tone of the meeting this evening, where we all recognise that this is a sensitive decision. It's a very important decision, but the meeting was conducted in a very collegiate and very professional fashion. And secondly, we're very fortunate to have at this point 2 outstanding candidates who would be able to perform the office of Managing Director to a very high standard. So it's all going exactly as I would have expected. We have made progress each time the Board of Directors has convened, and I've no doubt we will continue with that progress when we meet again after the summer.
On the question directed to me, indeed, and I've said it before, I do not see a euro crisis triggered by interest rate increases in the near future. That's what I read sometimes, but I don't think that is a correct assessment, because the situation today is completely different from 10, 12 years ago. 10, 12 years ago, during the euro crisis, there was a reason why a number of countries lost market access. They had real fundamental problems underlying disequilibria. They had lost competitiveness, therefore there were very large trade and current account deficits, also large fiscal deficits in some countries and rapidly rising debt. We don't have that situation at the moment. We don't have countries with very large current account deficits. We don't have countries where competitiveness has been lost. Every country has something to fix. Every country should work hard to strengthen the growth potential. But that's completely different from 10, 12 years ago, where a number of countries really had problems. And that's why markets were no longer willing to finance them. I don't see that at all at the moment. Of course, the debt is higher than before the pandemic. The pandemic led to necessary fiscal action that increased the debt level. We see a little bit of that now as a result of the war in Ukraine, because defense expenditures go up. In some countries, the cost for refugees go up. So debt levels are higher. But when I look at the debt service payments, the interest payments that the different euro area member states have to do every year, they are, in terms of GDP, at the lowest level in the last 50 years in all member states, despite the high debt level. So there's no problem for a number of years. That does not mean, of course, that countries should not be prudent in their fiscal policies, because new expenditures will come up over time because of demographics and aging, the transformation towards green and digital. And that's all reflected in the statement of the Eurogroup today, that countries are determined to be prudent. But that's a very different story from saying we are entering a next crisis because interest rates go up.
Yep, please, Sam.
Thanks very much. Sam Fleming from the FT. As you're meeting today, the Russians turned off the pipeline to Germany, gas pipeline. There's obviously increased the concerns about the need for rationing looking ahead of gas. I wondered if you could give us a sense of the mood in the room among finance ministers when it comes in particular to recession risks now in the euro area. Is this a growing concern because of what's happening in the energy markets? And then a question for Commissioner Gentiloni specifically, given you said you wouldn't be talking about the economic forecast, given you've got the forecast coming out on Thursday. What's the exact timing now you're expecting on the governance review? How soon do you expect the Commission will be able to present its proposals after the summer break? And do you feel you're approaching some sort of landing zone in terms of what those will look like? Thanks.
So ministers have always acknowledged that any change in relation to the supply of energy could have an impact on the performance of our economies and also on our growth forecasts. And when the Commission published their last growth forecasts, they acknowledged that there are many risks to that forecast. And when ministers have discussed it, we have also acknowledged, including today, that changes in the supply of energy, of course, do pose a risk to the ability of our economies to grow. So that tone was maintained today. If we look at the performance of the euro area overall, and if I look at the update that all ministers gave in relation to national economic performance, we continue to see growth within national economies. We continue to see growth in the euro area overall. We acknowledge that that growth is lower than it would have been but for the impact of the war. And we also acknowledge that a change in energy availability could impact that growth forecast further. But in fairness to the Commission, they also outlined this risk, and this provided the rationale for Repower EU and for the different steps that are now being implemented both by the Commission and by Member States to try to manage that risk in as best we can.
Yes, indeed. As the President just said, the crucial factor for a possible adverse scenario is exactly the supply of energy. And this was already clear in our spring forecast. And this risk did not diminish in the weeks that we have behind us. It's still there and increasing. But the fact that we all recognize this risk should not bring us to give a misleading picture of the state of the economy today. The state of the economy today is, of course, of very limited growth in relation to what was forecast, but growth is continuing at a limited path. Unemployment is very low, high savings, reopening and tourism. Of course, with this troubled water and possible stormy weather coming. We are aware of this, but we should not, because of the risk of a stormy weather, describe the economy as it is now as an economy in a storm. It is in troubled water with a possible storm that we hope to be, in any case, able to manage. As you know, the Commission will present some proposal for possible emergency in July the 20th, and will present after the summer break. After the summer break has different timing in different countries in the Union, but my guess is more or less the end of September. The new our orientation, our proposals. Of course, we will outreach to member states, and we will have a discussion after our orientations and proposals are tabled, and I am aware of the difficulties, but confident on the fact that the positions are much less entrenched than they have been for many, many years.
Danke, mein Name ist Ale Ahmed Hemken von Rodau Nachrichtensender. Ich stelle mal die Frage lieber auf Deutsch. Ist okay? Ja. Ich glaube, ich habe was verpasst, weil ich vorhin einen Live-Schalter hatte. Ich würde gerne wissen, Herr Kommissar, vielleicht können Sie ein bisschen näher darauf eingehen, wie Sie gegen höhere Energiepreise jetzt planen, erarbeiten, versuchen Sie zu vermeiden. Wie machen Sie das? Das würde ich gerne wissen, weil die Angst in Deutschland ist enorm, dass jetzt Russland wirklich den Gas zudreht. Wenn das wäre, was Sie jetzt gerade darauf eingegangen sind, gibt es noch einen Plan von Kommission, dass wir vielleicht eine Ersatzlieferung bekommen? Wie sieht es aus überhaupt? Dankeschön.
Well, not much. The end of your question is what can you say to us? Not much, because we are working on this 20th of July set of communication and proposals. You know that until now we had mainly three things. First, we provided this new chapter of the RRF national plans that we call Repower EU, which is financed by 20 billion in grants, and we will see in loans, because the amount depends on non-requested loans of Next Generation EU. So we will have for sure a substantial new chapter of RRF dedicated exactly to energy, emergency, and also, as you know, with a different regulation from the rest of the plan. So the rest of the plan has a regulation called Do No Significant Harm. This is not meaning that the new chapter will make harm by definition, but the new chapter will be able to support some technologies and expenditure, for example, the regasification of LNG, which was not possible with the previous regulation. Secondly, we are trying, as a Commission and as Eurogroup, to coordinate Member States' measures. I personally wrote to all finance ministers on the issues related to taxation, excise, and we are trying to coordinate measures that in our, I told before, mantra should be temporary and targeted. Not easy, of course, because there is a pressure. But we know that if they are not temporary and targeted, the risk is that we are undermining our own climate transition with these measures. There is not only a public finance risk, that you are only putting a burden on public finances, but there is also a risk on the climate transition. For this reason, targeted to vulnerables and temporary. And final point, we are trying to work on common initiatives of procurement of alternative energy sources. We had an important agreement with the Americans on 20 billion cubic meters of gas, agreement with Norway, as a Commission, and working with Qatar, etc. Is this enough? No, I don't think it is enough, and this is the reason why on July the 20th we will come with further proposals.
Thank you. I'll take two further questions from Zoom, and I'll start with Susanne. Susanna Freixas.
Yes, thank you, Susanna Freixas, SIC Portugal. I would like to ask President Donohoe if you think that the next or the successor of Mr. Regling is going to be one of these two candidates, either Mr. João Leão, either Mr. Pierre Gramenga, or do you think that in the end a third candidate, a different one, should be needed in order to get a majority here and an agreement? Thank you.
So based on the meeting that we had here this evening and based on the further work that ministers will need to do, I believe that we will see one of the two candidates emerge as Managing Director of the ESM. They are the candidates that have been put forward by countries and they are the candidates that were voted on by ministers today. So we will continue to work on this matter in the coming weeks.
Thank you. The next question is for Tommaso Galavotti.
Yes, good evening, Tommaso Galavotti, in Kronos, Italy. A question for the Commissioner Gentiloni, if I may. It's about, the euro is clearly heading towards parity with the dollar. I wonder if this issue has come up in the discussions in the Eurogroup and if it is a reason of concern. Thank you.
Well, it was not directly an item of discussion today, but of course it's part of the global picture. The strengthening of the dollar, which is not only in relation to the euro, is of course the reflection of the result of the global financial situation, is something that is putting a lot of pressure, especially for low-income and emerging economies, increasing their risks. It could be considered, and I think it would be a mistake, in my view, an advantage for some European economies because, of course, it is encouraging our export capacity. But I think we have to look also to the negative side of this coin. So it was not part of the discussion, an important part of discussion today, but I think we all consider this as part of the global financial evolution that we have to monitor closely.
Thank you very much. That's it for tonight. Have a good evening.